Hi, welcome back to the third session and the last session on syntax. When we are looking at sentences, we see that some sentences seem to have some relationship to each other. That is, they seem related in some way to each other. When two sentences have a structural difference that corresponds in a systematic way to a meaning difference, we have a transformation happening there. We can say that these two sentences are derived from a common underlying structure using transformational rules. For example, in yes-no questions, the boy must sleep can be changed to a yes-no question. How? By changing the position of must from its place T before a verb to the beginning of a sentence. So we have a movement from this place to the beginning of the sentence, and then we have this question. So a question meaning is added by changing the structure of the sentence. This is a transformation rule that moves modal to the beginning of the sentence in order to make a yes-no question. Two sentences, the cat chased the mouse and the mouse was chased by the dog, they are related to each other. They are active-passive pairs. What has happened here? The object of the sentence has moved to the beginning of the sentence. The verb has changed into a passive verb by adding a to be before that, and then the subject comes or agent comes along with by, and it goes to the end of the sentence. And we have the mouse was changed by the dog. So we know that these two sentences are similar, but then there is a structural difference between them, and that's being one active and the other one passive, and the meaning has changed. The meaning of a passivization has been added to the sentence. Or like what we have here, their sentences. There is a bear in your closet. A bear is in your closet. Or Tom stabbed her with his knife. With his knife, Tom stabbed her, in which PP is proposed. That is, it has been moved to the beginning of the sentence. What happens in these sentences? Well, they have similar meaning. They are derived from a common underlying structure, some transformational rule like movement, like passivization, like deletion have happened, and we have a new structure with some structural difference and meaning difference. There are two steps in the generation of these derived sentences. PS rules implement the export schema to generate a basic structure. So these are the basic structures. They are generated using export schema that we have already talked about, the phrase structure rules of English. And then the transformational rules at the second step apply to these basic structure to produce these derived structures. This one, that is the basic structure, is deep structure or D structure. This is the underlying structure. And the structure on which the transformational rules have been applied are called surface structure or S structure. With his knife, Tom stabbed her is the surface structure of Tom stabbed her with his knife. So here you can see deep structures of these sentences, and here we have the derived sentences or the surface structures of these sentences. They have a common underlying structure and they are related to each other through the transformational rules that have applied to them to create new sentences with a small structural difference and a difference in the meaning. These transformational rules, they tell us that these rules do not look at what are the words of those structures, but that they work on phrase structures, no matter what are the words that are there. And that's what we mean by structure dependency. So here, these sentences, it doesn't matter if it is the boy must sleep or the boy can sleep. If it was the boy can sleep, then the sentence would have been, can the boy sleep? That is, it doesn't pay attention to what is the word that is here, but that it moves T, the head of the sentence, T, which is modal here, to the beginning of the sentence in order to make a yes-no question. Or here, the cat chased the mouse could have been the dog chased the cat. And we could have had the cat was chased by the dog. So transformational rules are blind to what are the particular words that are used in the structures. They only look at what are the phrase structures and they apply to them. One of these structure dependency rules is movement. This structure dependency rule or transformational rule changes the position of a constituent within a sentence. It moves a constituent from a place to another place. For example, movement in these two sentences has preposed PP to the beginning of the sentence because these PPs have been adjuncts to V bar. The child found the puppy in the park, and the park can be preposed, and we can have a sentence on which movement has applied. In the park, the child found the puppy. If you remember the sentence that had a structural ambiguity, the child saw the man with the telescope. By moving with the telescope to the beginning, it would have only one meaning. And what's it? Yeah, as an adjunct to V bar rather than as an adjunct to the NP. If it is an adjunct of NP, it cannot move outside of it. But if it is adjoined to V bar, it can go to the beginning of the sentence. It can be preposed. And in this sentence, with the telescope, the child saw the man means that the child has the telescope, uses the telescope to see the man. So movement here causes the ambiguity to be resolved. Another case in which movement happens is in forming questions. Yes-no questions and WH questions. In this case, we talk about yes-no questions in which a modal can be moved. To form a question, move applies to the modal verb, which is dominated by T, head T, rather than the first modal that you can see. For example, in this sentence, the boy who can run fastest will win. So which one is the matrix sentence? Which one is subordinate? The matrix sentence, the basic sentence is the boy will win. And the boy has been modified by a relative clause who can run fastest. When we are going to change this into a question, we do not move the first modal that we see, like what we see here. If we do it, we have an ungrammatical sentence. So it doesn't look at the modal verb and it doesn't find the first modal to move and then make it into a question, but that it looks at the structure. That is why we mean that transformational rules are structure dependent, that they look at the structure and they do not look at what are the lexical items that are there. The head of the matrix sentence is T, and T has will in it. And when we are going to change it into a question, the movement applies on will and it moves it to the beginning of a sentence, and we have the yes no question, will the boy who can run fastest win? To visually inspect what we are talking about, this structure dependency rule, let's have a look at its phrase structure tree. So in the phrase structure tree of this sentence, the boy who can run fastest will win. Well, the boy who can run fastest is NP plus its modifier. And what heads this sentence? T heads this sentence like all of the sentences. And what do we have in T? We have will, which is what you have here. And when we want to form a sentence, this T, which is the head of the sentence, the matrix sentence, will move to change it into a yes-no question. And we would have, will the boy who can run fastest win? So movement is one of the structural dependency rules. Agreement is also structure dependent. That is, if, for example, in a language, we have that nouns and adjectives must agree, it is something that is dependent on their phrasal category, on their structure, rather than on what we have as words there. So here, as an example, verb agreement, which is seen in English and in Persian. Based on this structure-dependent rule, the verb must agree with the subject. So in the following sentences, we have the guy seems kind of cute. Seems agrees with the guy, which is third person singular. These guys seem kind of cute. Seem agrees with these guys, which is third person plural. And the guy we met at the party next door seems kind of cute. However, there's a distance between the guy and seems, but this does not cause any change in the agreement. because the verb agrees with the head in the NP, and it disregards whatever that is there as the adjuncts of NP. That's the same here. The guys we met at a party next door seem kind of cute. Seem agrees with the guys. So agreement, therefore, is structure dependent. And in this phrase structure 3, you can see that we have the guy as the NP in the specifier of T bar, which is the subject of the sentence. And we have in VP seem, and Sim agrees in third person singular with the guy. Another case of a structure dependency we can see in WH questions. And the question, what will Max chase? If we delete what, which is the WH expression, we would have this sentence. So there's something missing here. Chase takes a complement. It doesn't have the complement here, and what that has replaced this has also been deleted. We have an ungrammatical sentence. Will Max chase? But if we have what in its place, where it has been in the underlying structure, then the sentence is grammatical. Max will chase what? And from this underlying structure, we get this surface structure. How? One of the things that we do is that we move what to the beginning, and we also move will to the beginning before NP subject. So therefore, we use two transformational rules to move transformational rules, and we have WH questions. This is the underlying basic structure, or D structure, deep structure. So what do we have here? We have a TP that has NP and T bar as its complement, and T bar has T, will is in T. We have a VP, and VP can be written as V bar can be written as VNP, and we have chase what. Having this what causes that we have this Q plus for question under C bar and C. And we have in the specifier of CP, it's the place where what goes to. So in order to show WH questions, we need to think of putting a CP, which is a functional phrase. We have already talked about it, that CP is a functional phrase. And like all of the other phrases, it has C bar as its intermediate projection, and it has its head C. C is the head of CP, and this is where the modal verb and yes no questions will go. And the sentences like I know that, she knows, that goes in the C place. So from this underlying structure, how do we get from this underlying structure, how do we get to this surface structure? Now, a movement will move NP to this specifier of CP, and therefore we have NP here, and it move will from T to the C position in order to change it into a question, and the question will be formed. What will Max chase? There is no limit on the distance that the WH question can move to. For example, it can move over one clause, like what we have here, who did the senator want to hire. It can move over two clauses, who did Helen say the senator wanted to hire. So this is the place where who has been in the underlying structure, or it can go over three clauses. Who did Helen say the senator wanted the congressional representative to try to hire? So it moves over four TPs in order to get to here, and it can move over many more. Why we do not have these sentences? It's just because in performance, it's not easy to trace what's happening for the listener, and therefore we do not use it. Also, that we have physiological constraints in using it. Otherwise, theoretically, it is possible, and there is no limit on the distance that the WH expression can move to. What does it tell us? These long distance dependencies, they tell us about constituency in sentence, that the words within a sentence, they form groups that are called constituents, and if they are moving as a constituent. Here, the NP complement of higher is going to be questioned, and it doesn't matter if it's going to be moving over one clause or two clauses or over four clauses or even more. It shows that when we are applying transformational rules, they are structure dependent, and even from this long distance, they can show their dependency on the place from which they have moved. So, long distance dependency provides an evidence that sentences are not simply strings of words, but are created using phrase structure rules to form constituents and to combine them. What we have described for English so far, they also hold for other languages. That is, there are some rules that are shared by all world languages. That movements are structure dependent is something that is shared by all languages. That phrases are headed by a lexical category is something that is shared by all languages. That heads might take complements and might take specifiers is something that is shared by all world languages. This is UG. UG provides the basic design for all human languages, what is shared, common between all world languages. UG principles, the rules that are shared by all world languages, common between all world languages, a blueprint that is used in all world languages is called principle. UG principles, universal grammar principles, are shared by all languages. All of the languages follow X-bar schema. One of the rules in X-bar schema or basic rule is that phrases consist of specifier heads and complements. That barred categories represent recursive properties. They show adjunction. That sentences are headed by T, and T shows tense or modality. But besides these UG principles that are shared by all world languages, there are some language-specific variations. For example, in some languages, the complement comes after the head, and some it comes before the head. So these changes, these variations, these differences that are language specific, they are parameters. And speakers of any language, learners of any language, they set these parameters for their own languages in order to make grammatically well-formed sentences. For example, English is head initial. That is, first we have the verb and then its complement NP, like what we have here, eat the apple. We have VP. VP can be written as VNP, but in Persian we have NP, then V for a VP. سیب را خورد. And the phrase structure rule for that is VP can be written as NPV. Persian is head final, head comes last, and English is head initial, head comes first. So, based on what we have said so far, when children are learning a language, they are born with an innate capacity for language. They have this innate blueprint for language faculty. They are born with UG principles. What they need to do is to set the parameters, to fix the parameters, to make the correct choices for their language from variations that are there in their grammar based on the language specific language they are speaking. So this brings us to the end of this chapter on syntax. I hope you have enjoyed this chapter. Good luck.